Hey, you're listening to the Start Something podcast, where we take you behind the scenes on the founder journey, breaking down what it takes and how it can change your life. I'm Shruti.
And I'm Bailey. And on this episode, we're going to chat about how Shruti started and sold her first business when she was 24 years old.
Let's get started.
Okay, how do you feel being the first person interviewed on the Start Something podcast? I mean, it's a pretty big deal.
It's the biggest deal, okay? It's the biggest deal. I feel great. I feel honored, and I'm excited and happy to share everything that's happened.
Amazing.
In the last few years.
Who sells their first company at 24 years old?
I don't even know how to answer that.
Like at least one person.
Yeah, it's honestly really amazing to be able to share my journey with other people now too, my mistakes, what I went through, and yeah, just hopefully inspire other people to get started on their journey as well.
Yeah. So selling a company at 24, I have to know, did you always know you were going to do something like that? Like when you were a little girl, is that the kind of thing you wanted to do when you grew up? Or did you figure it out like in your late teens, early 20s, and then just go all in? Like tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So I'm actually born and raised in San Jose. So literally the heart of the Silicon Valley, which is crazy because I grew up with all of these technologies growing up around me. Honestly, I was born next to the Google campus, which is crazy, you know, and being surrounded by all this technology and in this area, it was an innate feeling from at such a young age. And it kind of came from the fact that my mom, she wanted to always be a founder. And she told me, then she had me, and then she had my sister. And my mom has been a huge inspiration in my life. Like she's always held VP of engineering or CTO roles. And so for me, I always thought I had to do it the other way around, where my first baby would be having a company and building something before I have my real child. And so honestly, that's kind of the logic that I went through. Growing up. So I always knew I wanted to build something. I didn't know the what, the when, or the how. And so that would take the rest of my life up until now to figure that out, slow and steady. And I'm still figuring things out, right?
So speaking of figuring things out, tell me a little bit about what it was like to be tiny growing up in Silicon Valley. Start from the beginning.
Okay, my parents immigrated here from India, and they built a huge lives for themselves, and they sacrificed a lot to make sure that me and my sister had all the opportunities that we did growing up, which was amazing. I'm very thankful for that. So growing up in the Bay Area was very competitive, right? Like I learned to code at the age of 6 is when I started. And then I went to an all-girls high school, which was also honestly, it was a perfect time to go to an all-girls school. I gained a lot of confidence. I was not afraid to raise my hand. I was not afraid to speak up. All those skills came from that time period, I think. And that quickly transitioned into basically an all-boys school where I studied computer science at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And quite literally, I was one girl of 10 guys in my study group and me. So that was our friend group. And that was who I spent my 4 years with studying. So that's pre like life before I started this company.
So tell me a little bit about this experience. There must have been a little bit of culture shock going from literally an all-girls high school to basically an all-boys computer science program.
Yeah.
So what shocked you, or did you feel like, oh, no problem, like I'm gonna fit right in?
There were definitely problems, okay? There's so many problems.
Tell us about the problems.
One, boys are grosser than you imagine. When 18-year-old
Not the direction I thought we were going.
No, it was a culture shock, honestly, because I went from being super confident in this all-girls school environment, and there were very few girls in our classroom, and even the girls that I knew, it was really interesting to understand how they think and how comfortable, not comfortable they feel like speaking up, like especially when we were interviewing for different internships, things like that. I often found that girls were more shy to just speak up, even though they knew the material just as well as any other guy in the room, right? So those were interesting things. The major itself was extremely difficult. Like they say boys make you cry, but computer science makes you cry more. Very valid phrase. They say that for a reason, I think. But I learned a lot, right? Yeah. And I had a group of guys who also inspired me. Like they had huge dreams and visions. I don't think gender mattered behind that at all. And that's what brought us together. We all had these dreams of starting something of our own. We had dreams of getting these like big jobs in the tech world. So that, I think, was awesome to just have like a group of support and love to push through these 4 years, because I really think I needed it.
At that point in the cohort that you were working with, did you know that you wanted to come up with a company in the next few months, years? You mentioned that you wanted to have a startup baby before an actual baby, and I'm curious, is this something that you had a timeline for when you were in college, or was it after you graduated that you kind of started coming up with ideas that you could eventually work with?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think one thing, if you're a girl, you probably relate to this, like no matter what, you're kind of on a time box with having a kid. Maybe that extended to like 40, maybe 45, but every woman does live on a timeline when it comes to having a child. And so that is deep rooted inside of me. Like I definitely, and especially because I wanted to figure this out before I figured out having a child, that concept kind of drove me to use college as a playground and like start experimenting, working with different people in college. Like there's a bunch of entrepreneurial groups at every university, I imagine, at our university especially. And so I would get involved over there and just honestly use it as a playground. It's a test environment to fail fast. It's a test environment to learn how to work with other people, understand my strengths and weaknesses. And that quickly, like to really directly answer your question, I didn't have a direct timeline in that moment in college. It more developed once I graduated from college, and I was like, okay, this is the real world. I just started working at Microsoft, like I'm a PM over here. What am I doing with my life, right? Like when you graduate, you don't have classes to think about. You don't have, nothing else matters. Now you're actually forming your adult life. And I had to ask myself, like, what do I want? And my dad actually gives me this advice. He's like, every 4 years, like think of school as like every 4 years. That's true, right? High school, 4 years. College, 4 years. He's like, where do you want to be 4 years from now? Crazily enough, this is 4 years out of college. So another check.
So basically you've made it.
I don't know about that, but I know that I know myself better. I know that I'm happier. I know that I'm more fulfilled. And I can't ask for anything more, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I know I can talk forever, so I'll stop.
You mentioned failing fast and trying things when you're in college. I think a lot of people go to university and are thinking about the courses they're going to take and the student clubs that they want to join and the extracurriculars and things they're going to do on the weekends, maybe the jobs that they have to work. But most people aren't going to college thinking about starting companies. Now, in Silicon Valley, at a school like, Stanford, there are probably a lot more students who are going into it like, I'm going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg.
Of course.
But I'm curious, is that something that you'd recommend to students, that they're actually thinking about, like the types of projects or companies that they could start as young as being in college?
Yeah, totally, right? And I agree with you that Stanford has a whole ecosystem around building companies at such a young age, and maybe other universities don't have that level of access. So what can you do, right? And that's really, I think, what you're asking. I have a few recommendations. One is, honestly, as much as I was joking and I struggled in having a technical degree, I think even just taking a basic computer science class, it's so helpful to understand how tech is built and how to think about it and how you can think about it. I think that's what I hate coding and I won't go back to coding, but what I do know is that I know how to communicate with engineers really well. And they respect me because I'm able to think through problems, how they're thinking about it. So that's one recommendation. Two is go and join like any business club, any entrepreneurial club, or if those don't exist, go and start one, right? Like go start something, or find friends that you can even just like treat the world like a playground and see what you can create. I think that's the whole idea behind failing fast.
Yeah.
And you can do that with anyone. College is the perfect place to meet people.
Right. I agree 100%. That's where I met my co-founder, but we're not going to talk about that.
Why?
So tell me, you're experimenting and like failing fast, like you said, in college, but you don't start your company when you're in college. You go get a job at Microsoft. Did you know you wanted to work at Microsoft, and did you immediately get hired there, or was there a process of, kind of shopping around, looking at other companies, and what was that like?
Yeah, great question. A lot of trauma behind the question. No, mostly because, I have a ton of learnings now, but I interviewed 50 different places before I got my job at Microsoft.
Wow.
And I just want to be honest about that, because too often people are like, oh, look, I just got this internship at Microsoft. I got this job at Amazon, really whatever it is. And people celebrate their wins, which is awesome. But people don't talk about how hard it is to get something like that. So I really want to focus on sharing the hard sides of it. Like, you have to prep a ton, you have to lead code a ton, you have to do practice mock interviews with people. Whatever you learn in school is a different skill set than interviewing. And that was my takeaway. So no, I didn't know I was going to get a job at Microsoft like that. I did know that I wanted capital. Like, I was huge on bootstrapping. That was like something I'll talk about later in this episode, but I needed capital in order to experiment, right? And use the world as my playground. And so I told myself I need to get some sort of job, like a 6-figure salary job. I need to graduate college with that, especially if I'm investing this much time to study this kind of degree. So that was the goal, and this was the result.
Yeah.
And how it happened.
So you said you wanted to bootstrap. What does bootstrapping mean?
Good question. So there's two types of things. I think, and maybe in a future episode, we're going to talk about your journey, so you can spend some time talking about fundraising. The other coin of that is bootstrapping. So quite literally, every month I get my check from Microsoft, I dump all that money into building things, right? And actually, maybe something to touch on is that I met my co-founder in college, Karthik.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so okay. Karthik and I pretty much took all of our computer science classes together, which is awesome. And I didn't know he was going to be my co-founder post-college, but I did know that I needed someone I could trust. And I spent 4 years building trust with him, right? We were studying together, doing hard stuff together, also doing some of those playground pet projects together. So that translated really well post-college.
So you're working at Microsoft, you're saving your money to be able to invest it into this business that you want to start. At what point do you and Karthik have a conversation where you ask him to be your co-founder?
Yeah, so I actually got bold. I thought I could do everything by myself. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a baby. It takes a village to build a company. It's not like a solo thing at all. And I learned that the hard way, but quickly. So about 6 months into my journey at Microsoft, coincidentally, it's a weird word to use, but COVID hit at the same time. So what does that mean? A, I was lucky enough to still have my job at Microsoft, but B, I got all this free time back. I was just literally rotting in my room watching TV.
Okay, hopefully not literally.
No, not literally. But really, I was just going through cycles of what do I do?
Were you alone?
I was with my roommate, but kind of alone, honestly.
Are you guys still friends, you and your roommate?
Oh, we're really close. So it's all good there. Life works out there.
Because it could go one way or the other.
That much, you're spitting facts, honestly. But really what I gained was all this time, right? And I quickly realized after a month of chilling, I was like, this is invaluable. I'm not gonna get this in a post-COVID world. You're constantly socializing, everything. So I was like, now's the time. And one of my closest friends, he went to Stanford. So he was part of this founder ecosystem. He had never interned at big tech companies. He had always worked on his own thing. So he was a huge inspiration for me. And he literally told me, he was like, Shruti, if you want to get started, just pick a problem. Any problem that you have in your personal life, and just start experimenting. And what you start off with will not be with what you end. And I think that's fundamentally the biggest piece of advice now I share. If someone asks me, how do I get started? This is the sentence that I say. Because it was life-changing. That's how I got started with Stitchology. And I thought I could do it by myself. I went through a few iterations, quickly learned that wasn't the case. And in parallel, Karthik was part of this. And he was like, dude, can I just give you some advice here and there? And I was like, eventually, forget advice. Like, dude, we need to work together. I don't want your advice.
Was he working full time?
So he was at Facebook and I was at Microsoft. And every day, literally as soon as working hours ended, even before working hours, we were just on the phone all the time. We're like putting a plan together. How do we experiment? What are next steps? How do we launch our V1? How do we fail fast together? And we also developed a co-founder relationship. We literally had a Google Doc where we wrote, here's some feedback for you. Here's some feedback for you. And it made all the difference, honestly, because when you're building something, you're literally building a personal relationship as well, or business relationship. So it was needed.
I just love this image of two engineers giving each other personal feedback on a weekly basis via a Google Doc.
Yeah.
It's just perfect.
Literally, we're like, here's what went well, here's what could have gone better, here's what could be improved significantly.
Well done.
Yeah. And now here we are. So it works. Google Docs can work, guys.
Yeah, for relationships. Google Docs is a tool for relationships.
Exactly.
I came up with their next ad. We did this together. Well done.
Is Google Docs sponsoring us?
Google Docs, if you're listening,
feel free. We'll take all your money. Don't worry.
we need a coffee budget. Okay, so you are on the phone every day and working full time, but taking nights and weekends to build Stitchology.
Yeah.
So you said that if you want to start something, just start with a problem that you have in your life. Okay, so what problem was that for you?
I have loads of problems.
Okay.
We don't have enough time to uncover.
Bring it on. Why are we making a podcast? To talk about your problems.
Literally. I'll start with the problem that was in my life. It was accessing South Asian clothes. So I'm obsessed with saris, lehengas, and in India, you can actually custom design this and custom create this. And I don't get the opportunity to go to India too often. So for me, it's hard to access something like that. So I was like, why not see if other women have this issue, right? So I got on the phone with 300 women, 1 hour phone calls. So guys, I also went on a fitness journey during this time. I would go on a walk like every day and keep getting on the phone with these 300 women. And what I quickly realized is these are 300 customers and they're facing the exact same problem I'm facing, and I'm onto something. And they want to access this, right? So I developed relationships with designers in India. I spent about 3-4 months working with Karthik to create the development behind everything. We did a ton of design testing. We got a ton of feedback. We iterated a few times in that time span, and we eventually launched. It was like December 2020, I believe, or something towards the end of the year is what I remember. And I was like, great, I'm gonna get 300 customers on my day 0, no problem. So it's launch day, we launch, and literally 12 hours goes by and I'm like, nobody's bought anything, what's going on?
And what did you launch?
We launched a tool where you could, thank you for asking that. We launched Stitchology V1, which is a tool where you could custom design and create your entire outfit and communicate with the designer online and get your outfit delivered to your doorstep. So everything was seamlessly done with technology, minimal communication, and you get it delivered to your doorstep in the US, right, from India. So that was the V1 vision. Thanks for asking that. But it ended up, in the end, we got $0 $0 in sales. And I was so butthurt. I was like, oh my God, like what's going on? Like this, what's happening? And VCs asked this question, why now? And that's when I understood the definition of that question. Why did they ask that? It was COVID. And so there were no events, there was no socializing happening. So people didn't have events that they could go to where they could wear these clothes. So no one was placing in orders, which was a huge learning. Like to this day, people are asking me, they've seen my posts in the past and they're like, is Stitchology still up? Like, can I access it? Can I use it? And I'm like, damn, I really like, I definitely chose a problem that has like product market fit. It had to do with the timing. So that's V1 of Stitchology. If I walked you through all the iterations, it might take up the next 1 hour.
So tell me, we'll skip some of the iterations, although I'm sure they're all very interesting. Tell me where the business ended up. So you started with this company that allows users to design and eventually receive tailored specific clothing to them. Where did you end up? What was the product of the company that was Stitchology that you ended up selling?
Yeah, so I'll walk you through a one-liner of the iteration so it's not jarring on where I ended up. So once we launched that version, we'd also spent a lot of time understanding designers' problems behind running a business, like a fashion business. So that's when we started working with e-commerce brand owners. We started working with more designers here in the US and brand owners here in the US and UK. And that's really when we landed on the final version of Stitchology. That was our persona, and it was a product analytics tool. So I don't want it to be so jarring, but it started off in a B2B2C, and it ended up in a B2B, honestly.
Yeah. What is B2B? I want to define some of our terms.
Yeah. I will throw acronyms left, right, center. Great. Good thing you're the one leading here, and I'm the one answering. B2B is business to business, and B2C is business to consumer. So that's a great thing that you're asking, and you have to think about things like margins, right? Your margins on a business to business are typically higher than business to consumers. The amount of money that you can charge a business is typically much higher than a consumer. So there were a lot of shifts in how I ended up with the product that I did, and the problems I was solving, and the journey that I went through, which again, we won't spend too much time, but it ended up being an awesome tool. After, like, I remember this so well, when my largest customer called me and she said, Shruti, I can't stop using this tool. I wake up every morning, I brush my teeth, I log into your tool. And I'm like, okay, that is a sign of product market fit if I've heard of something, you know? And I think as a founder, and you relate to this, that's probably the most heartwarming feeling that you can experience. Like your technology is making an impact on someone's life.
Yeah, and what is product market fit?
Yes, good question again.
Thanks for all the compliments on the questions. I really appreciate it. I'm just confused. No, tell me about...
as a founder yourself.
Tell me about
You want to define this one? I don't know if I'm the best teacher out there.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the way that I think about product market fit, and I'm sure Paul Graham has like a perfect definition of it, but product market fit has to do, it's this moment when you realize that the product that you have developed and the customer segment, the market, the group of people who want that product are actually kind of in alignment in a way that lets you know, oh, I'm building the right problem and I have access, like the channels that I've developed to reach the customers, like I have a channel to reach them and they want this. So product market fit is, sometimes people think of it as, oh, you hit product market fit when you make, $1 million in, annual recurring revenue. Some people find product market fit when you get a few large customers who are able to demonstrate the same need, same use case, etc. But it's kind of it's like the gold standard for startups. It's like you have to get to product market fit, and that's really what every single startup is on a race towards.
Yes.
And even if it's not a startup, I think every company is sort of working towards that in the early days, because like you mentioned, you don't start, typically, most founders don't start with the actual idea that they will really deliver, right? So
100%.
So often the solutions that are relevant to the market are not the ones that we first come up with. And so before you reach product market fit, one of my investors said this, and it just really resonated with me and has stuck with me ever since. He said, before you reach that point, startups are actually learning machines. The goal is not just to sell your product or have a specific impact. The goal is actually to learn what is my market? Who are these specific customers? What kind of large pain points that they have that we can solve? And you're answering those questions. And so instead of getting attached to the solution that we come up with, it's kind of our responsibility as founders and CEOs to be willing to pivot and make small or large changes to know, okay, we're going in the right direction. Do you have any idea how many pivots or changes you made to your business?
Honestly, about 5 major ones. I didn't even count the minor ones.
That is so many.
And
most founders pivot once, at least, at least once.
Yeah, at least once, but realistically a lot more. And I really think you defined it perfectly. And one thing I just wanted to add to what you're saying is listening to your customer is how you reach product market fit. So I've seen plenty of founders who are like, I want to make an impact on the world, right? So they will just build whatever they think is the right solution, which is when you hit that's why this terminology of product market fit kind of came up, right? Because you're not building what comes to your mind. If you want to make money on this idea, if you have a customer persona you're solving for, you really need to fundamentally understand who they are and what they want and what their problems are. And how does that relate to my experience? I actually went in order to, I don't know the first thing about running an e-commerce brand, of course not. But what I did is I became one. And I got really hacky. So I convinced a bunch of brands to join my marketplace that I launched. And that's how I learned to run a bunch of analytical experiments. And once I became a brand owner myself, I really understood. I was like, oh shit, and sorry for the poor language, but I'll think twice next time. But I really thought, oh man, this is really difficult to build a brand from scratch. How do I expedite this process? And as a brand owner, you wear so many different hats. You're doing marketing, you're doing sales, you're creating the product itself, right? You're really doing a lot. So that's what I think really helped me achieve product market fit eventually and quickly. That's my journey, which, yeah.
So after achieving product market fit, first of all, let me go back for a second, because I love this idea of creating a tool that someone says, I go to sleep, I wake up, the first thing I do is log into your tool. You must have, and your company must have been having a very big impact on your customers' lives, if that's the kind of testimonial they're giving you. So first of all, kudos.
Thank you.
Second, okay, take me to the moment where, you've been running this company, but you're realizing that there's a future that isn't so far out that an acquisition is possible, right? A business is approaching you to maybe collaborate or to just straight up buy your company. How did that conversation start?
Well, it doesn't just happen so seamlessly. It's not a knock on the door, hey.
Wait, that's not how it happens?
Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. It was honestly the most unexpected thing. Really, and it's easy to say that now, but in when I think back to how it all happened, I really never expected this to happen. And I'll rewind a little bit. So as I'm going through this journey, I'm failing a ton, right? But while I'm failing, I also know I'm not the smartest person in the room. I have something to learn from every single person I meet. So I built this vast set of network of mentors throughout my process. I'm like, this is what I'm trying to do. Here's what I'm building. Even 15 minutes of your time. I would literally DM 50 people a morning on LinkedIn, just to most people will say no, but the people who do say yes, they're the people who are gonna be in your corner, right? And every no is one step closer to a yes. Something that I learned from my dear old Bailey over here.
I was gonna say, wow, that's really smart.
Yeah, there you go.
I totally agree with that sentiment.
So through this process, one of my mentors introduced me to the CEO of the number 2 usability testing company in the market. It's called Try My UI for those of you who have heard. And at that moment, it was more honestly just getting advice from a CEO who's run a company for quite a few years and who knows his shit. And I learned a lot from him. And in parallel, we were just brainstorming, really. At this point, we had hit product market fit with Stitchology, and I was also trying to understand, is e-commerce brand owners my only persona? And that's really when I started also talking to product managers, UI UX designers, and marketing teams, where everyone needs a product analytics tool. Mm-hmm. Anyone with a website needs a product analytics tool. So my persona vastly expanded. And simultaneously, Try My UI's target audience is product managers, UI UX designers, and marketing teams. So there was a lot of synergy when we were both just ideating with each other. I tried to understand how his customers were using his tool and vice versa. And really that's when the conversation, it was quite organic, literally. It started off as conversations and brainstorming, and about a few months later, it turned into an acquisition. So really, honestly, unexpected, and worked out for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking back on your journey, I am sure you have learned so many things. But if you could look back and talk to yourself just weeks into the company, okay? So how old were you when you started it?
Probably 22.
Okay, so let's go back in time and chat with 22-year-old Shruti. What would you go back and tell her if you could just give her 1 or 2 pieces of advice?
Persistence is key. And high emotions fade away, low emotions fade away. So just having that persistence through all of that is probably the fundamental piece of advice. Persistence and discipline in order to get to where I am now. And if I have to do it all again, that's really the thing that I will channel again.
What can people do to develop that persistence or that like groundedness that you're also alluding to when you take out the low lows and the high highs? Like how can we develop that?
You have to know yourself. And that took its own journey in parallel, in tandem, and you can start today, right? Knowing yourself means waking up in the morning and writing your thoughts down and being content with your thoughts, whatever those are. It means understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, accepting that you are not a perfect person, and finding the help that you need. So it took me assessing what are my strengths. I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at understanding their customer, like their problems. What am I bad at? I hate coding. Like I will chant that out loud and clear. I understand it and I work with engineers, but I don't like development myself. And that's where Karthik comes into play, right? Because he is a beast. Like he will tell you 100 solutions within a second about how to solve your problems. So it really takes self-awareness and building that self-awareness. You can do, I'm sure maybe you've done this too, but plenty of exercises just to be able to recognize that. I know you've talked to me about in the past, like getting like a mindset coach or like a career coach to help you explore that. But even tools that are quite literally free is a pen and a paper to get you started in the morning. I don't know if you have anything to add over there as well.
Well, I think it's a great point that there are so many free resources that can help really can help make significant progress in the direction that we want to go. I know for me, you're talking about journaling or just unpacking all of your thoughts on paper. I think that's probably one of the most life-changing habits I've adopted since starting my company. When I was about 3 years into running my company Perimeter, I started getting panic attacks all the time, and they came out of nowhere. I didn't have a history with panic or a history with anxiety. I think I've always kind of been like a person who worries a lot. Maybe that's an anxiety disorder, but like I'm worried all the time about all sorts of things.
You're preaching to the choir.
But I started having the physiological panic attacks, and they didn't seem to be triggered by like a specific situation or environment. They would literally come out of nowhere. Sometimes it would happen like at the grocery store. Like I'm not in a like concerning situation, and my heart will start pounding out of my chest, and like my skin will get hot, and like everything kind of, it's almost like starting to get tunnel vision. And I talked to my doctor about it, and I decided that the thing that I would start doing, because I ended up meeting someone right at this time, right after talking to a doctor, and they said, hey, before you try anything, and this is not medical advice, but this is the advice that I was given, and they said, before you try anything, like just as soon as you wake up in the morning, start writing down, like just write 3 free-form pages, like right when you wake up in the morning. And I started doing that, and it completely changed my life. I mean, I stopped, it took about a month before I really started to feel the effects, but I will still occasionally have a panic attack, and it'll happen out of nowhere. Like it happens in really random places, and it will happen occasionally, like maybe a couple times a year, but it used to be a couple times like a week.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm able to like process everything about my experience. I'm able to pour it out. And before, I didn't feel like I had a place where I could actually pour out the experience. Yeah. And so it felt like it it was all getting trapped in my body.
Yeah.
And so what you're sharing about like waking up and journaling, it's free. I mean, you could probably like, you know, borrow or steal a pen from one of your friends.
Look,
like,
I will mail you.
You don't even have to buy a pen.
Paper.
Like, ask for a pen from somebody. You don't even need a journal. I mean, you literally need like a piece of paper. Like it really doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that can have such a big impact, not just in terms of like processing anxiety, but like you said, also getting to really assess our strengths and weaknesses. And the only way we stay in this game is if we're able to assess our strengths and weaknesses, whether it's of ourselves as founders or of the current solution that we're experimenting with. Because when we pivot, when we change our product or the direction that we're going, it's because we're getting data that something isn't working, that there's a weakness, or we're getting data that something is working, there's a strength, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of always doing those pivots, not just with our products and our companies, but literally with ourselves as founders.
Literally, and I think that being part of, for those of you who don't know, Bailey and I literally met through a founder community called Maker, which is amazing because I really think it brings like-minded people who are open to, not everybody is open to journaling, honestly, not everyone is open to even doing the exercise of understanding themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think just even surrounding yourself by someone, even one person who's open to this idea might encourage you to be disciplined about it and take that step forward.
Yeah, speaking of discipline, you mentioned that persistence and discipline were the two things that you'd go back in time and talk to yourself about. Yeah. So what are the things that we can do to help ourselves stay effectively disciplined?
So one, I think in the context of building your own company, having a co-founder makes all the difference. Like when I'm high, he might be low and I'm the one helping him out. Vice versa, right? When I'm low, he's high, and we're the only two people who are experiencing the exact same thing because this experience is fucking crazy. So that's one. I think two is being able to like create routine around yourself, and it kind of goes back to like discipline and knowing yourself, but like understanding, okay, the first thing I wake up when I do is focus on me. I spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or maybe it's working out. So like a whole hour just focused on me, centering myself, makes all the difference. For the rest of the day, I'm good to go. For the next 12, 15 hours, I'm really good to go when I take time to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And three, setting boundaries, honestly. Like I think that's huge on being able to fulfill like whatever goals you need to do inside of you. Like being able to say no. Helps achieve that as well.
There is so much that we could unpack there, and I think we will probably do at least one, but probably multiple episodes about boundaries, so I'm not going to open that can of worms, but I just want you to know that I want to. Okay.
I'm glad. It's noted. In the first 10 episodes, you'll see one of them being about boundaries.
Okay, good. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
Thank you. So we've already talked about a lot today.
Yes.
Given everything that you've learned thus far about starting and running and eventually selling businesses, what is one thing you know that you want to continue to do in the future? Like, what's one thing you're going to do to build your life intentionally based on everything that you've learned thus far?
I think you just said it. Building your life intentionally is the key. Oftentimes people go through their 20s, through their 30s, just like letting life take control and just going with it. I'm actually of the opposite belief. I think you should be intentional. The name of this podcast is called Start Something. I think I'm going to start something again. I know. It's more of a matter of figuring out the how, what, and when. Like I said, right?
It's all a cycle.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, I have other intentions of starting a family, like having a home, having this podcast. I hope I can eventually write a book. Like I know my goals and I'm being intentional about how can I achieve them.
Amazing. Well, hey, thank you for being the first guest on the Start Something podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so inspired, and I think I have some things I want to go work on in terms of discipline and persistence to be able to keep myself going over the next couple of years.
I love that.
So thanks for being that person in my life that always sets the bar.
Don't worry, I'll call you at 7:05 every morning and make sure you're awake.
Make it earlier. Let's go. Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Start Something. Is that good?
That was great.
Okay.